Last week we talked about this dynamic of the individual and the collective. And we saw in Moses' life how God, through 40 years, after 40 years he kills the Egyptian, spends another 40 years in the wilderness, then God calls him to spend another 40 years in the wilderness, and we saw how God created with Moses an integral, intimate, remarkable relationship. But the question is always, does that scale up? We all intuitively engage in groups. When we talk about America, we talk about it like a thing. When we talk about the church, we talk about it like a thing. And then we'll say things about that collective body that makes sense, even though we all understand there's a lot of dynamics underneath. There's a lot of particularity. Does that actually hold? Someone could say, Sacramento is blank. And you might say, I live in Sacramento. I don't think it's that way at all. And it depends. Is it? Isn't it? Is it sometimes? Is it not times? How does the collective get formed? And how would God engage in transformation of a collective? There's no hotter topic right now than nationalism and religion. Wanting a collective body to reflect or deliver what I think is just, true, beautiful, good, and right. Whether you're an emperor or just a voter, every time you go to the voting booth, you're trying to sway the collective in a direction. You know, your local church might serve as a part of that, but does it scale up? And can it, or should it? When Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to Israel." This is God's mission for Israel. As we started at the beginning of the book, God has been estranged from the world. God has been calling individuals to himself, but he says, I am going to take a nation and a people, and they will be my witnesses. And that's going to be the story of this long Old Testament. Can Israel show, as a collective group, who the Creator God is and what he wants for his world? That's a tall order. And so he rescues them from Egypt and brings them into wilderness. And wilderness, well, just yesterday I was at Gordon's birthday party, and one of Gordon's sisters sat across from me, and they were talking about her grandson has just finished Marine basic training. And she was proud of him because he finished basic training, and serving in the Marines had been a family tradition. Well, when you join the Marines, you don't just give you a uniform and get in line. No, what do you got to do first? You go to basic training. They are going to make you a part of the Army. Well, in many ways, the 40 years in the wilderness for Israel are supposed to be basic training to get them ready for this mission to bear witness to God. Now, they go out of Egypt, and right away they're confronted with the wilderness. And you can imagine, maybe if you grew up, now we don't have the draft anymore, but a lot of you remember the draft, and maybe you had a lovely home, and your mom always had everything all set for you, and then you go into basic training in the Army, and guess what? Now your mom is an Army sergeant, and he might not talk like mama, or maybe he does. I don't know. Depends who your mama was. But Israel gets out of Egypt, and they're in the wilderness. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they came out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. Just imagine a lot of recruits in basic training grumbling against their drill sergeant and the army. Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt, when we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us into this desert to starve the entire assembly to death." If you remember a little bit, it's like, well, wait a minute. Weren't you slaves in Egypt? Weren't you crying out because of this or that? You know how we are. Hindsight is rose-colored glasses. Oh, don't you remember when such and such and such and such? Yeah, I remember. And there were those things too. I don't think about those things. I just remember the good stuff. Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them to see whether or not they will follow my instructions." Now, this test word is kind of funny because I don't need to know a lot to know the answer to this test. The answer is no. And the reason you have this answer is because I know people. And, you've got basic training. You've also got school. These little kids come into school. They spend the first 2 years. All they do with these little kids in school for the first few years is, this is your teacher. This is how you sit in a chair. This is how to raise your hand. This is how to put your name on the top of the paper. All this training. They don't know anything. So in other words, this testing is going to be more like basic training testing. The Israelites, they don't know anything about God. Now they're going to have to learn something. So tell them every morning, go out and gather, and on the 6th day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. Okay, so here we have this test. Let's see how they do. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it is the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him." Now keep this word grumbling in mind as we continue to go through. "Who are we that you should grumble against us?" Moses and Aaron said, "You're blaming us for this. Did we do the plagues? No. You'll see God delivered you, and you'll see God will take care of you." Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening, and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You're not grumbling against us. You're grumbling against God." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" While Aaron was speaking to the whole community, they looked towards the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in a cloud. Now, this glory cloud will show up again and again. It'll be a pillar of smoke by day and a pillar of fire by night. It'll descend upon the temple after Solomon builds it and fill it with glory. It'll show up when Isaiah is in the temple. The glory cloud will be there. You'll see the clouds mentioned in the New Testament. This is a very important thing. And so suddenly they see this cloud of glory, and God is showing them, this is who I am. This is who you are. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumblings of the Israelites. Tell them at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." So he's revealing himself to his people. That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, tiny flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" And in Hebrew, that's basically manna. Means, what is it? I don't know, but you can eat it. for they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some gathered little. And when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses, as you would imagine, and they kept part of it until morning. And it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. But this is the idea of daily bread. You have enough for today. Can you trust that the Lord will have it for you tomorrow? You see this boot camp. You see this training that's going on. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person. And the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be the day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning." Now, of course, all of the really smart rationalists there said, "Wait a minute. We tried gathering extra, and it got all moldy, and it got all maggoty. That isn't going to work." So they saved it until morning, as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord." If you remember all the way in Genesis 1, you have this Sabbath. And so right now here, you can see the lessons that the Lord is giving them. You can trust me. And then there's this Sabbath that we're going to begin to practice. And it's kind of scary because can we trust him? Will the bread hold? Will we eat? You will not find any of it on the ground. 6 days you are to gather, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any. And again, you can imagine some thought, well, if I gather twice as much on Monday, then I don't have to go out on Tuesday, and then they got the maggots. So then they're going out every day, and they're probably like, boy, I really wish we didn't have to gather this every day. Well, this one day a week, there's no gathering. Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather it, and they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why the 6 days he gave you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out." So the people rested on the 7th day. Important verse. The people are resting on the 7th day, just like the Lord rested on the 7th day. The day of rest is a gift. The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was like white coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so that they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt." So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it. Then place it before the Lord to be kept for generations to come." As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna with the tablets of covenant law so they might be preserved. And the Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a land that was settled. They ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. Now, what did you learn from the story? Well, the people were happy to leave Egypt, but their memories are short. That's something we sort of know about ourselves too. They're people. The wilderness comes before the promised land, partly because promised land isn't something simply outside of you. Every year, all kinds of young football players hunger to get into that NFL. It's their dying dream. They want to be in the NFL. 2 years after NFL retirement, 75% of NFL retirees are broke or divorced or both. What does that say? Lottery winners, people who win, you drive down the highway, you see like 130 million. You'd be amazed how many lottery winners go bankrupt. Because what the wilderness teaches you is that promised land isn't just about what's around you. Many of us try to engineer our lives and orchestrate our lives by orchestrating everything around us and often everyone around us. It's a pretty common thing that the person that you stand on a stage like this and tell the entire world that you love more than anything else in the world and more than anyone else in the world, a few years later, you'll be talking to your coworkers or your pastor or your therapist about what a jerk that person you married is. Promised lands are very strange places. They are not simply out there, they are in here, which is what the boot camp of the wilderness is all about. Moses needed to be a failed revolutionary until the Lord would call him 40 years after that to actually successfully liberate the people of Egypt. But then Moses, poor fella, has to be the drill sergeant that has to help Israel turn its way in the wilderness. Will it get there? Well, what you'll learn if you keep reading the Old Testament is that the Israelites are able to take the promised land and turn it into something of a wilderness. Another guy who shows up on the live stream sometime, Alex Luna. I really like Alex. He became a Christian a few years ago. And his job, he is a psychiatric nurse working in a locked facility. When he told me that, I thought, oh, I know the kind of stories you have, because I've known a fair number of people who have worked in locked psychiatric facilities. They have great stories, because the thing about a locked psychiatric facility, there's no more pretense in there. Everybody's stuff is exposed, and you get to know something about life. And in one of the live streams, he said to me, because we're doing the estuary thing on the live stream, and he said, all of us know you have to eat, and we like to eat every day. You can go a few days, and even if you start missing a few days of food, you'll start to lose weight. Your body will start to break down. You can't go that long without food. But it's also true that all of us need to be loved. But you can go a long time without feeling love, but it's sort of like not getting food. We need food every day, but the relationships, the love, the community, if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to live. Jesus, when he was tempted in the wilderness, the devil comes to him and says, "You're hungry. Turn stones to bread." And Jesus says, "Man does not live on bread alone, but on every word which comes from the mouth of God." And when you think about that, when you think about how we need food, and when you think about all of the other things we need that are beyond food, one of my favorite illustrations of this, I was in Florida one year when my mother-in-law and her husband were still alive, and they'd winter in Florida because nobody wants to winter in Michigan. So we visited them one winter in Florida and went down there, and they thought, well, it'd be fun. My kids were all little. It'd be fun to go to a gator farm. So we went to a gator farm. And here at this gator farm, they had this mammoth alligator. His name was Goliath. And he was in this pool. And there was about this much water in the pool. And it was a pretty good-sized pool, but he was a really big alligator. And there he was alone. And he just sitting there in that pool. And so I asked, one of the people there at the gator farm, "Aren't you worried about him? And there's no real fence around him. Doesn't he get bored in that pool?" Because you think, alligators don't get bored. Just go over there every day and throw a little bit of chicken at him, and he's just fine. Live his whole day in that little shallow pool. And we often think people are like that, but they're not. Dostoevsky, this great Russian novelist, made the observation in Notes from the Underground where he says, if you give a human being the food that they want, the sex that they want, the things that they want, and you just fill them up all according to their basest needs, they'll still destroy the world, just to spite it. That is how we are. We don't just live on bread alone. That's not how people are. For a long time as a culture, we've thought, if you just give people enough stuff, they'll be happy. Nope, it's not true. It's not how we are. Now, our memories are short, and you can put a jar in the ark with manna in it, and every now and then people are like, is the Lord going to provide? And you could haul out that jar and crack it open. See the manna? You know, but as many of you know, you had this crisis in your life, you had this trial, and you went to the Lord, and you, please, and the Lord delivered you. And you said, I'll never doubt him again. Next trial comes, you're doubting him all over again. That's how we are. It's what we do. Israel will go up and down. And as a body, it'll be divided. There'll be faithful Israel and unfaithful Israel. Elijah will say to the Lord, Lord, I'm the only one out of all of Israel that's faithful to you. And the Lord says, no, there's a whole bunch of people over there that are faithful to me, and you don't even know them. Apostle Paul will do the same thing in the New Testament. Israel, as a witness, is something of a failure. And what's amazing about the Bible is, however much we love success stories, you read that story of Israel through the Old Testament, it is a story of failure. And yet we still read it, and we still learn from it, and we try to figure it out. Israel will achieve, a temple will be built, the temple will be destroyed, a second temple will be built, that one eventually will be destroyed too. You see, the first thing we think when we discover that there are bad people in the world, it's like, if only we could get rid of the bad people, then the world would be great. It doesn't take too long. You can see it in the flood story. The good people and the bad people, they're all the same people. It doesn't mean that there aren't people that are a little bit better, a little bit worse. It doesn't mean that. It just means that, as Solzhenitsyn said, that line between good people and bad people, it's right down the middle of all of us. So then we think, well, what we really need in the world are rules. And those rules have to be enforced. And that's true. We wouldn't want to live in a nation that doesn't have rules, and we wouldn't want those rules to not be enforced. In fact, there's Rue. And Rue was an amazing dog. That dog could learn rules. That dog could learn tricks. I was amazed what we could make that dog do. I always had this little pouch that had treats, and I always had it on my side. And I eventually called that little treat pouch the keys to the dog. The reason I did that was if I'd go up to that dog and try and make that dog do something, that dog knew if I had that pouch or not. And it'd be like, we're really only going to do that if you give me a treat. Keys to the dog, just as reliable as if I go in my car without the key, it won't start. If I go up to that dog without that pouch, that dog would look at me and like, you want me to do this stuff for free? I don't think so. So as long as you're using rewards and punishment, you can make people do stuff, but they'll only do it while you're watching. And they'll only do it while you're rewarding or punishing, which isn't the kind of obedience that God is looking for. It's not even the kind of obedience parents are looking for. Parents love their children into honoring them, not because they're afraid of them. My kids have long stopped fearing me. If they honor me, I want them to honor me because they love me, not because they're afraid of me or trying to buy my favor. Jesus has just fed 5,000 people. Everybody's like, wow. And you have to also understand that it wasn't until very recently, and even still in only certain places of the world, that We have so much food that we just give it away. Through much of human history, food was scarce. Do you know that when they did the recruitment for the Second World War, they discovered that 40% of the inductees had signs of malnutrition in them? 40% in 1941. Think about that. They wouldn't find that today. Then they found him on the other side of the lake because he did the miracle. He fed them bread and he went to the other side of the lake. And they asked him, Rabbi, when did you get here? And Jesus answered, very truly I tell you, you are looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Early on in the 19th century Protestant missionary movement, they had a saying called rice Christians. Because when the preachers wanted people to hear their sermons, they'd go out and nobody wanted to listen to them. And then they discovered if we give away free food, everybody will come. They thought, wow, our churches are full. Everybody's taking their rice on the way out the door. After a little while, someone said, you got a bunch of rice Christians there. They don't care what you're telling. They're just looking there for the food. Do not work for food that spoils. How often did manna spoil? Every day, except on the Sabbath. But food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him, God the Father has placed his seal of approval. So they asked him, what sign then will you give us that we may see it and believe you? Oh, you mean like a jar full of manna? Will that do it for you? Our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it was my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Sir, they said, always give us bread. Put us on the dole. Have us eat manna. Now, if you continue to read the desert wanderings, they've got manna all the way through. Does that mean they stop grumbling? Does that mean they stop rebelling? Does it mean they won't find some next thing to be dissatisfied with? Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never grow hungry, and who believes in me will never be thirsty. But as I told you, you have seen me, and still you do not believe. All those the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me, I will never drive away. For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of the one who sent me. And this is the will of the one who sent me, that I shall lose none of all he has given me, but raise them up in the last day. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. At this, the Jews began to grumble about him because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. And they said, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, I came down from heaven? Grumbling. Grumbling comes up in this of all conversations. Stop grumbling amongst yourself. He's speaking to Israel. He's speaking to us. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent them draws them, and I will raise them up in the last day. It is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. No one has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I give for the life of the world. And when he said that, a lot of them had had enough. Because first he says he comes from heaven, then he calls himself bread, and then he offers his flesh for us to eat. But all of you heard that, and you didn't bat an eye because you've been living with it. Sunday after Sunday, month after month, we rehearse this ritual. Jesus preaches this, and some of his disciples are thinking, oh, I've kind of had enough. And others stayed and said, where else are we going to go? And so then it was later, after he had marched to Jerusalem, he's meeting with his disciples. He's ready to enjoy the Passover meal, that Passover meal that celebrated God bringing them up out of Egypt. And he picks up bread and he breaks it and says, this is my body. And I'm sure, or at least I would hope, that some of those disciples that had heard him across the lake, recorded in John 6, when he told them to eat his flesh, when he had done this, they begin to say, oh, this is my body broken for you. Because he's about to take them on a journey through a kind of a wilderness, through a wilderness of death, and it's going to come then to Easter on his resurrection. And so this is the journey that we take when we eat his flesh. And when we drink his blood, we participate with Israel in the desert. We participate with the disciples listening to Jesus. We participate in receiving the bread of life, looking forward to being raised on that last day.